Hey everybody, what's up? Mr. Dissonance here, very happy to be back. And I'm just playing some 15s, and I see here someone that I've played in the past, probably at the $60 or $100 level. And I hope to focus a little bit on this video on c-betting. C-betting, something which, even though I've been playing for many years, is something which I still think about constantly. This guy I know from his green label is pretty loose, and therefore I will check back this particular flop with straight draws and flush draws and just give it up on the turn, because I suspect I'm getting cold there. I'll talk about that more in detail after the match. After the match, I'm going to I'll get rid of my emails. I popped it there. I'll get rid of my those emails, and I'll bring up the hand replayer and just look at things in detail and go through my thought process as much as I can. Alright, here I've got bottom pair, there's two overcards, there's a possible sort of flush draw popping up, and I'm going to fold bottom pair in this spot because the board's too wet and there will be too many turn cards which I can't continue on. Alright, and I'm just going to limp this one, see if he lets me limp. And even though it's a really horrible hand, I'm still going to do that. And this is interesting when he donks at me. What I think I'll do is raise him, fire a second barrel if he calls, and fold if I get raised or re-raised. Why am I doing this? Because there's plenty of cards which I'm beating at this stage. He won't have a king so often. He'll have flush draws, other fours and twos. When he calls two barrels like that, he's probably got a flush draw, king, or a four. So let's have a look. If it's a 4, we're probably going to chop. And it turns out to be the 4, yeah. My line gave me some fold equity there by raising him and firing the second barrel. But we'll have a look at that later when we bring up the replayer. Alright, and here what I'm going to do is bet, and then bet the river when he calls me. Which he didn't call me, so that's nice. And I'll explain that as well when we look at the replay. But what I'm trying to do essentially is either hit my draw or set myself up so that I have fold equity if he misses as well. Alright, I'm going to find my second barrel, and I'm using a gamepad so you won't see the mouse moving. Oh, okay. So here we've got an open ender, and we've also got an overcard, which gives us, what's that, 11 outs, so we're roughly about 40-something%. We've already got quite a few chips in there. The problem is that he can have open enders and pairs, which really crushes us. So I think that I am going to commit here. Hope he's got a worse draw, or that we hit like we just did. He can have something like Jack 5, for example, which are also dominating. It's a pretty tricky spot, and once again, we'll talk about that once we bring up the hand history player. I'll go through all the hands in detail. Alright, and if you're interested in the HUD, this is actually the coffee HUD. I bought the full HUD, and then I just adjusted it by taking out some stats that I liked or didn't like, and I also adjusted it by making some of the numbers bigger. Oh, I forgot to turn off my Sharky, didn't I? Dope. So, turn Sharky off, pole, stop. Yay. And there we go, awesome. So we don't have another game running, which is exactly what I want, and we can bring up the replayer, which is also what I want. So it's saying, yeah, if you're interested in the HUD, I adjusted Coffee's HUD by making it the numbers bigger because I'm old and blind. Well, you know, I wear glasses and I like having larger numbers and not so many. I took out some which I didn't feel were appropriate, but I paid for the thing, which is cool. Alright, let's go have a look at these hands from the start, and I'll explain my thinking in each different spot. So let's go for this first one here. We've got 5-6 suited, is that correct? And he folds, right? Not much to say about that. This one where we raise 8-9 suited. Let's start off. The pre-flop raise with 8-9 suited is fine. I mean, you raise a lot of cards in these hypers. This guy has the green label, which means he's a known loose passive player. That's the label which I use for this particular player type. Now, when he calls me on the pre-flop, which is expected, we have to look at the flop. Normally, I would c-bet this flop, even though it's got a flush draw and a straight draw and a couple of big cards that he can hit. I still think that I have some fold equity here. And the way to think about it is, there's two ways to think about it. If he's a loose passive player, he's got a wide calling range pre-flop, which means that any particular flop, a high flop like this is not necessarily going to hit him. And by that what I mean is that if he has a narrow calling range, he's more likely, in my opinion, to hit a flop with Broadway cards, because all of the lower cards are out of his calling range. When he has a wider calling range, it's sort of one flop is just as unlikely to hit him as anything else, if that makes sense. Now, the other problem with that is that he's more likely to call without very much. So when I add it all up, I think I'm not going to bet this particular flop. If it was a fraction drier, for example, Queen 7-4, that's quite a bit dry. I mean, if I didn't have this 8-9, and say, let's say my hand is 9-6 and it was Queen 8-4, then I would probably see better. It's just the fact that it's got both a flush draw and a straight draw and two Broadway cards, which makes me think I won't bet it. The other good thing about loose passive players is that they often do check back turns, so I can pick up some equity. If I hit my jack or my 8 or my 9 or something, I might now be good. So he's not often going to come betting at me, which means that I can afford to be a little more passive against this particular player type. As it turns out, I check back, he fires the turn, and then I give up on the hand. Alright, just simple play, don't have anything, give it up. But that's why I chose not to c-bet this particular flop. Alright, let's look at the next one. I mentioned this one in the vid. He limps and I hit bottom pair. Now here's the thing. I'm out of position. I have bottom pair. There's a reasonable chance that I'm currently winning. But by the time we hit the river and a 9 or a 10 or a king or an ace or another spade comes or whatever, there's a reasonable chance that I won't be winning, or that my hand is so weak I can't handle much pressure. So despite the fact that my hand is probably going to be good here a reasonable amount of the time, it's just not worth competing in this particular hand, because you're out of position and there's too much pressure coming and you need to give up this spot once he puts you under pressure. Hence, I fold this on the flop. Let's go back to the hand for a sec. I would, oops, wrong one. I would continue on a jack, and obviously I would probably raise a queen considering how wet it is, and I would call something like perhaps 8-10 or 8-9, and even an 8 with an overcard. If I had, for example, 8-king with a spade, then I would call that. They're the sort of bottom sort of holdings I would call, which I feel are strong enough that I can pick up extra equity and continue to compete in this hand. But otherwise, even though I'm quite possibly good at this stage, I'm not going to stay in the hand. Alright, this one here, which I quite like, cool little hand. So I limp. Why am I limping 4-6? Well, he's passive. He's got this green label, and therefore it's likely I'm able to limp 4-6. Then he leads out, and I decide to raise him, which is quite, I think, an unusual move. Why am I raising him? I don't like flatting my little pair here. If he's bluffing, then there's lots of turn cards that he can put me under pressure or hit. If he's got some junk, I want him just to get off the hand, so I'm going to push him off the hand and not let him realize his equity. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I don't normally put people who lead out here on the king. It's unusual for them to do that. I put them on draws or weak pairs like the 4 or the 2, and if it's a 4 or the 2, I can make some of those fold a lot of the time by raising. Like if he's got, 4-6 or something, or 4-7, he might fold. It's true that he's loose. When he calls this second barrel on the 4, that's actually a pretty poor play by him. He's not bidding anything now. He's just got to hope that I'm completely bluffing. And a lot of players will give up at this stage, which is why my play works so often. And then I'm going to give up on the river because I'm also not bidding anything, although I am splitting with the 4, but it's too much risk to fire a third barrel hoping to push out a chop. So that's why I choose to raise instead of flat calling. If you flat call on this spot, what's going to happen is people keep barreling bad and you'll end up calling and folding. So I would, if I'm going to sort of possibly end up calling a barrel or two, I'd rather spend those chips by raising and have fold equity. All right, now when would I not check raise him? Well, I wouldn't check raise him, for example, if I'm holding the king and I just want him to keep firing at me, or if I have the 4 and some other equity, like let's say I got a 4 and a flush draw, yeah, I'm probably got the best hand, but I might slow play hoping to pick up a deceptively strong hand and trap him that way, and if not, push him off on the turn. But that's getting a little complex. Let's move on here. All right, queen 4. He limps, which is nice. Check, check. And then on the turn, I pick up a semi-bluff. I've got an open-ender, an overcard, and it's a sort of flop where I don't think he's very strong. So I can bet the turn here, and if he calls me, I don't think he'll be very strong, and then I'm going to fire almost any river, except for perhaps a 2 or a 3, which means he'll probably call me on king high or something. But basically almost any river is going to get fired on, because people call you on, for example, 4x themselves if he's got a little open-ender, or he'll call me on random overcards, and then when all of that misses, he can't call the river. And of course, if he does call me on those, on sort of any sort of hand, there's also the chance I hit my queen or my straight and get paid off in that sense. So you want to be betting these semi-bluffs out of position and barreling if you get called. Right, next hand. This is actually a pretty tricky one. I min-raise king 5, and he ends up calling me on something like 6-9, which shows at this stack depth that he really is weak. And, well, not weak, that he really is loose, sorry, it's the word I meant to say. And that therefore I probably should have, I'd have been better off just, I'd have been better off maybe limping this. Like, my strategy against people who are really loose is to limp a lot more. Now on the flop, it's a really tricky spot. I bet and get jammed on. What to do now? I obviously have no fold equity. There's like 110 of my chips in there, and I'm going to hit my 2 or my 7 or my king. That's 11 out, so roughly 44% of the time. So I guess clearly this is just a call, because I hit what I assume is going to be the nuts almost half of the time. And oh, is that right? Let me think about the maths. I'm not that good at maths, so if I'm hitting it half of the time, I've only got 110 chips in there, and it's costing me an extra what is it, 410. Oh god, maybe mathematically I'm out of I should be folding this. I'm not really good at maths. The way that I play heads up sit and goes is basically pattern recognition. I recognize different spots as having different strengths, and it's a really different approach to the game, but mathematically I'm not particularly strong. But it doesn't matter, because I make up for it with a great pattern recognition and some basic maths. So perhaps I should have actually folded this. So I need to be getting about 2 to 1, or it should be costing me about 2 to 1, and it's costing me a lot more, like 9 to 1 plus the chips that are in there. So 110. It's costing me like 4 to 1 basically. So this is actually a fold, I guess. Dope. I guess I made a boo-boo here. If my maths is wrong here, don't get upset at me. As I said, I'm not great at maths. It's not my thing. Simply mention it quietly in the thing, and don't chew me out for having poor maths. That's why on the site we have all sorts of different instructors. You got guys who are brilliant mathematicians like Coffee, but perhaps their pattern recognition skills are not as strong as mine, and other guys whose maths is, as you can tell from this explanation, shit, but have brilliant pattern recognition skills. So you can pick up different things from different people. Obviously, you're not going to come to me for maths. I'm not that good at it. Anyway, I luck out, and it's all good.